Hey, Joe Gilder here from Presonus. Today I want to talk to you about my favorite shortcuts and efficiency hacks inside of Studio One. But first, we need to talk about why speed matters. Now, you might not be as obsessively focused on efficiency as I am, but there are still good reasons to find faster and more efficient ways to do things in the studio. Two main reasons come to mind. First of all is efficiency for efficiency's sake. Now, just bear with me for a second. Let's say you're on your way to work and you find a new shortcut that gets you to work 10 minutes earlier. Are you going to take that shortcut again? Yeah, most likely. It saves you 10 minutes, which means you've bought back 10 minutes of your life. You can now leave for work 10 minutes later, or you can now arrive to work 10 minutes earlier, or you can leave 5 minutes later and arrive 5 minutes earlier. Win, win, win. But you still accomplish the same task. You got to work, only you did it in 10 minutes less time. You did it more efficiently. When it comes to working in Studio One or any software for that matter, it makes sense for you to spend some time to invest a little bit of your time up front in learning how to do things quickly and efficiently. So on the back end, you can get the same amount of work done in less time. Which leads me to my second point of why speed matters. It allows you to make more music. What do I mean? Well, chances are you're busy. You have a lot going on, and you probably can't devote unlimited time to music in your studio. Whether you can do a couple hours a week, a couple hours a month, or a couple hours a day, regardless of how much time you can invest into your music, if you can make the most of that time, you can make more music. Case in point, let's say it takes you 10 hours to mix a song. How many songs can you mix in a 10-hour day? One song. But let's say it takes you 3 hours to mix a song. You learn how to do it quickly without sacrificing quality. Now you can mix 3 songs in a 10-hour day versus 1. See what I mean? You can make more music given the same amount of time. I've interacted with a lot of folks over the years, and a lot of times one of the biggest hangups I see for people is it takes them so stinking long to do anything in the software, and they get burned out, they get tired, they get exhausted, when if they spent some time becoming more efficient, becoming faster at moving around, then they would get to spend more time making music and less time poking around and doing things the slow way. So, if you like being slow, by all means, continue in your slowness. May the force be with you. However, if you find yourself thinking, man, I wish I could get this stuff done quicker, pay attention to some of the hacks I'm going to show you today. I hate the word hack. I'm sorry, I just said hack. Pay attention to some of the tips I'm going to show you today. Not just keyboard shortcuts, but a few different functionality ways to get around Studio One that'll help you be more efficient, make more music, and just be happier. First thing, real quick, I'm a Mac guy, so if you're on a PC, you're probably used to this, but when I say command, it looks like that little weird infinity symbol. That is the equivalent of your control in most scenarios. When I say option, it's that funny looking symbol. That is typically akin to your Alt button. Shift looks like an up arrow. That should be the same for both. You may have to modify this just a little bit to get it to work on your system if you're on Windows, but you should be able to do everything I show you here on either system. Okay, this first one is quick and easy. See these buttons down here? Edit, mix, browse. They're great. They have to put them in there. There's really no reason to ever come down here and press these buttons. Likewise, there's really no reason to ever come up here on the top left and press this inspector button. Why? Because you got F keys at the top of your computer that will do that job for you. For example, the mixer is F3. Boom, 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 boom. Open that mixer, close that mixer all day, every day. You want to open your browser and see your plugin specifically? F7. Boom, F7, F7. Want to open the inspector? F4. This is a really useful window. You can see your plugins on a particular channel. You can see a bunch of other stuff you probably don't care about. And you can open and close that with F4. And then edit is F2. I don't use edit all that much, but it's there in case you want it. Now, if you're like me and you use one of these cute little wireless keyboards from Apple, you'll notice the F buttons also do things like turn the screen brightness up and down. So by default, if you press these, they won't do the F functions without holding down the function key. There's a way to fix that inside of the Mac. Come over here to System Preferences, go to Keyboard, and then you'll see this option here, something along the lines of use all F1, F2 function keys as standard function keys. What this does, it flips the functionality. So when I press F3, it will bring up the mixer as opposed to having to press function F3. So if you have a smaller, more compact keyboard, there's probably a way to do it where you don't have to press 2 keys every time you want to do functions like that. So you can see there I pressed the F3 while holding down function, and it showed me all the windows versus just doing the F3 function. And by the way, now's a good time to show you, if you are curious about any of the keyboard shortcuts, you knew there's a shortcut for something, you suspect there's a shortcut for something, come up to the menu under Studio One, Keyboard Shortcuts. You can see and search for everything. So you can say, man, I know Joe had a shortcut for Inspector. What was it? Oh, okay. I type in Inspector, it shows me that it's F4. You can also change that if you decide you want to do it differently. Now let's talk about navigating around the Arrange window. When you're working on music, if you have more than 2 tracks, you're going to want to be able to get around the session quickly and easily. You want to be able to zoom in when you need to zoom in, zoom back out to see the bigger picture, and the faster you can get at that, the quicker you can get this work done. One of the hardest things for me is if I go to a different system, a different DAW where I don't know all the shortcuts and how to zoom in and zoom out, I feel completely hamstrung because it takes forever to do everything. So let me walk you through a few of the things that I like to do. Now, you can get to things like down here on the bottom left, if we click and drag right here, we can zoom in vertically. If we click here, we can choose different sizes from that menu. I never, ever use that. Also over here on this bottom right-hand side, you can do this to zoom in and out. All right, I never use that. Another way to zoom in and out is to come up here along where it shows you your bars or whatever time base you have. You can click and drag down and up, and that will zoom in centered on wherever you clicked and dragged. That I will use sometimes. But let me show you the faster ways that I found to do this. It's funny, Gregor said this in a video recently. If you have a suspicion there's a faster way to do it, there's probably a way you can do it in Studio One. It's just that intuitive. All right, I'm going to walk you through my favorite ways to navigate, and I'll explain them all as we go. The first is, obviously, if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, then you'll be able to do things like scroll up and down while you're zoomed in. Super handy. What you may not know, if you hold down Shift on your keyboard and then scroll up and down, you will now scroll sideways. So you can quickly navigate down, over, up, over, by just switching between holding down the Shift button and not holding it down. Now let's talk about zooming. Let's say we've zoomed in and we're looking at just these couple of drum tracks, but we want to zoom out and see everything else. We can still do that with our scroll wheel on our mouse by holding down Command and scrolling. Now we can quickly and easily scroll up and down, and I believe it tends to kind of center on whatever track you have selected. So if I click on this guitar and then zoom in, it's going to keep that one in view. I use this all the time. I'm always moving around my session, and then I hold down Command and scroll up, and I can quickly zoom in to check on something and then zoom right back out to get back to a bigger view. That was vertical zoom. Let's talk about horizontal zoom. You might have guessed it. If you hold down Command and Shift and you scroll, now we're zooming horizontally. So instead of having to come up here and click and drag, you can just hold your mouse anywhere and it will quickly, by holding down Command and Shift and scrolling, you can zoom in and out. So you can see how you can quickly go from this view to Command scroll to get up vertically zoomed, and then grab that Shift button and zoom some more to get the horizontal zoom. It'll take a while to get used to that, but that is a much faster way than coming over here and clicking that tiny little button and then zooming in and then coming over here and doing, like, you can see how this would just save you gobs of time over the course of a session. The one I use the most is this vertical zoom all the time. I'm using that all the time. Now, one more thing that doesn't quite work the way I want it to work, but I'm going to talk to the boys in Germany and see if we can make that happen. Let's say you've zoomed in horizontally and vertically, and you want to get back out. You're kind of lost in the weeds, or you're finished with what you wanted to do, and you'd love to just zoom out and see everything at once. It'd be great if there was a keyboard shortcut for that. Well, there is. It's Option Z. And what that does is it zooms out vertically to include every channel in your session. The one thing I wish it did was I wish it also zoomed out this way so it filled up the screen. It tends to do it like this, where you can see everything, but you've got this giant, massive amount of blank space over here. So maybe we can change that. But Command Z still is a great way. See, just there, if I hit Command Z again, that's interesting. Let's see. If I zoom in like this and then zoom in like this and then Option Z, it pops out to that. So still super helpful to just kind of get yourself back to seeing things all in one kind of view over on the left-hand side of the screen. Another quick thing I didn't mention, I don't do this a lot, but if you just want to focus on one track, like this lead electric guitar, you can click and drag on the edge of the track and resize it however you want. As soon as you go to zoom things vertically, though, everything will jump back to being the same. I just occasionally will do that. A lot of times I just zoom everything versus going in and zooming one, because zooming everything is faster than going and finding the edge of that channel and then pulling it down. Okay, one special thing for my Mac friends, if you happen to use a trackpad, which I love the trackpad, a mouse makes my hands hurt. I don't know if it's from moving it or my wrist or using the scroll wheel, something about it. My wimpy little hands don't like a normal mouse, and I can't stand the trackball thing, but I love this trackpad. It's essentially just the pad off of a laptop, but it's right here and I can use it on my studio computer. Now, a couple of things you can do with a trackpad, and this isn't unique to Studio One, but just generally speaking, it has a few functions that are super cool. The first is pinching to zoom. So if you look at the screen, if I go like this, I can zoom in horizontally by just doing that pinching motion on the screen. I can zoom in and zoom out. I use that a lot in my session, so I'll use Command Scroll. So scrolling on a trackpad, just in case you didn't know, scrolling is you put two fingers down and you move your fingers up and down, and that will scroll. That also works left and right. So if I want to get around a session, let's say I'm zoomed in and I'm up at the top left of the session, I want to get to the bottom right while maintaining this zoom level, I can scroll down and I can scroll over on the trackpad. It is super intuitive and super, super handy. I do this all day, every day. The other thing is using that combination of the pinch to zoom in horizontally and then holding down Command and scrolling with two fingers to zoom in vertically. That gets me around the session super fast. Now, I've already shown you how to do that with a regular mouse with a scroll wheel, and if you have some variation of that, it'll probably do you some good to just explore and see what kind of options are available. But this trackpad, getting around the session like this with just a couple of flicks of the finger, super, super handy. This is one of my favorites, and it's not something that I think is exclusive to Studio One, but when I first switched, it was a game changer for me because Pro Tools at the time didn't do it. I don't know if it does it now. And that is simply the ability to use the S, M, and R keys on your keyboard to engage, mute, solo, and record. So let's say on this kick drum track, if I press S, look what happens. The kick drum becomes soloed. If I come over here to this background vocal, if I press S, it is soloed. If I press M, it's muted. And if I press R, it record enables the track. Now let's say I want to select all of them and solo them. Boom, I can do that. I can mute them all. I can record enable them all by just pressing the buttons. To me, that is just one of my favorite things. There's an added thing you can do with that that's even cooler. Now, this is something I do all the time. So for example, if I'm editing this lead guitar, and I'm at this section. I've zoomed in using the tricks I've shown you. I'm right here in the song. And I'm like, what is that electric guitar doing? Now, I could come way over here and press S to listen, or I can just click on it because my mouse is right there. Now that this channel's selected, and you can tell because it's a slightly lighter color, I can just press S. So again, let's do that again. I'm over here somewhere, and I think, what is this electric guitar doing? Click, S, play. So handy. Imagine doing that a bajillion times over the course of a production. You have just saved yourself countless hours. Okay, maybe hours is a little much, but imagine how quickly you can get around by just using those keys. So my left hand is hovering just on the left-hand side of my keyboard, which means I can access the S button, which is the one I use the most, as much as I want. Right there. Spacebar, S, Command, they're all right there just waiting for me. The mute is over here. I don't use the mute as much, but it's still there, and it makes sense to keep it on the M key because I'm not smart enough to hold a bunch of shortcuts in my head. The other cool thing you can do from an advanced standpoint, let's say you open your mixer. Look over here in the top left-hand side of the mixer. You see this M, S, and power button? Power button lets you turn on and off all inserts. That's cute, but not really the point of what I'm going to show you. This, if you hover over things, by the way, if you hover over almost anything in Studio One, it will give you some sort of information about it, which is super helpful. So like, for example, hover over the mix, it says F3, and it's called console. But over here, this little M and little S is called global solo and global mute. This is really interesting. So let's say I have soloed my bass. Let's find the buses. Let's say I soloed my drum bus and my bass bus. So we're just listening to those. Now, that's two different things I have soloed. How do I go back and listen to everything and then go back and switch back to soloing? Well, the only kind of logical way is to click this, click this, click this, click this. That's fine, but let's say I had drums, bass, electrics, and acoustics clicked. Well, now I've got to click 4 times to go back and forth. Not so fast, Kimosabi. This global solo command will rock your world. So it's Command Shift S. So S for solo, Command and Shift. So now I can say whatever I want. I've got these 3 or 4 things selected. As soon as I hit Command Shift S, it turns all the solos off. Get this, when I hit it again, it turns them back on, just the ones that I had selected. So if I had some weird thing where I say, I want to hear this verse vocal and the electric guitar 2 and acoustic guitar 2, I want to hear what they're doing, and then I want to hear everything. Command Shift Solo, press it again, and it goes back to just having those 3 channels selected. I use this all the time. If you're trying to solve problems, or you're trying to just hear how your mix sounds with and without certain elements, Command Shift S and Command Shift M are your best friends. Another example of that, sometimes I'll mix drums and bass, and then I'll turn them off and mix everything else. I'll mute the drums and the bass, and then I'll just listen along and mix everything. Then I want to bring drums and bass back in. 2 ways to do it. You can select both channels and click M and S, and that works fine. But if you accidentally deselect them, then you can't do that anymore. What I like to do, you guessed it, Command Shift M will turn them on and off. Here's what that sounds like. Give the power to protect and not abuse. We could even say, let's do that with the drums, bass, and electric guitars. Give the power to protect and not abuse. Super, super handy. And if you forget, it's kind of hidden, but it's right here at the top corner of the mixer window, global mute and global solo. You can obviously click these to do the same thing. Look at that. I clicked the solo. It remembered the thing I had soloed from a couple minutes ago. It just remembers whatever the last one was until you change it. Super, super cool. Okay, here's another one you might not know. Let's say you just want to set your faders at unity. Unity, by the way, is just at 0. It's the default place where the faders are. There's a number of reasons why you might want to do that. I don't care why you're doing it, but if you wanted to know how to get it exactly on 0, well, the answer isn't that you have to do this number. Oh, I missed it. Okay, I almost got it. Oh, went too far. You don't have to do that. Hold down the Command key and click. Boom, goes to 0. If it's way down here, boom, goes to 0. If it's way up here, boom, goes to 0. That's also true of just about any setting in any plugin as well. Let's say I've messed around with this EQ and I want it to just go back to its default. Boom, Command click, it goes back to 0. Also the frequency, Command click, it goes back to its default setting. And by the way, Command Z is going to be your undo friend. You should get used to that. With a couple of versions, a couple of updates back, they allowed Command Z to affect plugin moves. So look, I just undid a couple of moves on the plugin and went back to where it was. So handy. So when in doubt, if you're trying to get something to go back to where it should be at the beginning, Command click it. For example, these guitars. I don't want you pan left anymore, and I don't want to have to come in here and just barely move it to the center. Command click, boom, back to the center. Now, I wish there was a shortcut to make it go left and right, but that's a subject for another day. Now, here's a basic thing that's really just a computer function, but in case you didn't know, if you want to select a bunch of things in Studio One and then do something to all of them, they make it really easy. Let's say I want to select all of these tracks through these red tracks here. I click the first track, I hold down Shift, I click the last track, and they're all selected. Now I can do things like move all the faders at once, or drag a plugin to all the tracks, or create a send on all the tracks at once. Super handy. But what if they're not in order? Or what if we wanted to see these blue faders, those are my buses? What if I just wanted to select the channels, the white faders, and not the blue? Well, we can do it a couple of ways, but the simplest way is to hold down, instead of Shift, hold down Command and click each track that we want to select. It takes a little more time, but once we have them all selected, they will do what we said before. We can move them up and down, we can solo, we can mute, we can do lots of things based on what's selected. This used to be a thing I remember when I used Pro Tools, that you really, you couldn't do this easily. You had to select them all, then you had to create a group for them for any of this functionality to work. I don't use groups a whole lot in Studio One because this functionality is so simple. Another way to do it, click the first one, hold down Shift, click the last one, then hold down Command to deselect the ones you don't want, and that's probably the fastest way to do it. But super, super handy. You can do lots of things. Oh, I need to turn all my master buses down. Boom. Simple, easy, no need for any fancy shortcut. You just select them by holding Shift, do what you need to do, then click somewhere else to deselect them, and you're off to the races. One thing to keep in mind, if you accidentally have multiple selected and you start moving a fader, remember it's going to move all the faders, and you might accidentally be turning things up and down. So just make sure you're only selecting multiple things for a certain purpose, and then click on another track to deselect them to get you out of that kind of danger zone there. Okay, here's a feature that I just love, and I use it all the time. Let's say we've got these 10 background vocals, and we want to run them to a single fader. So I can put EQ and compression on all the background vocals as a subgroup rather than EQing all of them individually, which would just be a waste of time. A bus would be the right solution for that. In a lot of other systems, you have to create a bus, then you have to come and send all the channels to that bus, and there's just a few steps involved. Not so with Studio One. Click the first one, hold down Shift, click the last one. Now just right-click on one of the tracks. And if you'll notice, right here it says Add Bus for Selected Channels. Look what happens. Boom. Couple of things just happened. One, you saw this bus with the blue fader get created. But also, if you look closely to all these channels, they are now all routed to bus 1, which is this bus here. I can change the name to BGVs for background vocals, and you can see it shows that they're all being routed to BGVs. They're all coming through this single fader, and now I can adjust that, put EQ, compression, and things on that all the time. If you do a lot of top-down mixing where you're running all your drums to a drum bus, all your guitars to a guitar bus, this is a quick and easy way to do that. And even within, let's say you have these two need to be processed differently. We can create a bus within a bus. We select these two tracks. We say Add Bus for Selected Channels. Look what it did. It created another bus. We can call this BGV 1 and 2. But now these two channels are being routed to this bus. This bus is being routed to the overall BGV bus. That's a feature that actually I contacted Arndt over in Germany about. When you create a bus, that bus should be going to wherever the tracks were going prior to creating that bus. That just makes more sense. So now these are still all coming out my background vocal bus. Super handy. If you don't use that, start experimenting with it. Might save you a ton of time. Okay, last thing. It's not a shortcut, but is so cool, and one of the primary reasons I started getting really excited about Studio One all those years ago. Let's say there's an acoustic guitar like this one, and let's say, let's find one where I came in early. Okay, let's say right here I came in early. The beat is right here on this line that you can't see super well, and I came in a little bit early. Historically, the way I would edit this, if I'm doing it from like a manual editing standpoint, is I would cut here, I would slide it over, get it in time, then I would drag this edge back and then reach up and figure out a way to do a crossfade. There were just several clicks involved, and then do a crossfade over here. Just typical editing that I'd been doing in Pro Tools for years. But now the way Studio One does it, it's just great. So click here before the transient, click over here before the next strum, and then I hold down Command and Option, and you'll see the icon change. If I click and drag here, look what happens. I can move the underlying audio without changing the end points. That's amazing. So I can slide this back a little bit. I let go. Now I press X, which looks like a crossfade, right? Boom, look what happens. It did a crossfade at the beginning and a crossfade at the end. And it just works like magic. Didn't hear any snaps, pops, clicks. I got it more in time. Life is beautiful. Look how much time I saved. I did 2 clicks, a drag, and a button press. Let me do it one more time just so we're all on the same page. Click, click, Command Option, drag to the right spot, X for crossfade, and I'm done, and I can move on with my life. It is just so fun and one of my favorite nerdy little features. If you like editing things manually, you don't want to go in and have to do time stretching all the time, you just need to fix things here and there, that is a wonderfully fast way to do that. Now, as we wrap up, I don't expect you, option Z, to remember all of those things right out of the gate or to even incorporate all of those into your workflow. But I do hope that you got one or two things that got you excited to go try out on one of your sessions moving forward. Don't be fast because Joe Gilder said to be fast. Be fast because it makes it more fun. If I'm fast at the boring stuff, I can spend more time on the fun stuff like making music, recording, mixing, all that jazz. As always, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. Later.